I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Today I'm talking to Kevin and Noelle Broyles from Atlanta, Georgia. Kevin left his lucrative medical profession at the peak of his career to spend 8 years directing a Hope Medical Clinic in La Paz, Bolivia. Noelle shares about how she lost her leg to cancer as a teen after growing up as an orphan. Listen as she talks about planting seeds, or see something and do something, practicing justice, or just imitate Christ's example. Finally, the Bible's 7-Eleven store that she goes to pick up the basics of her faith. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. I want to say thanks for listening. It's so encouraging when I hear people listening, whether they're in China, whether they're in Papua New Guinea, whether they're in New Zealand or Japan. I mean, I just hear from people from time to time, and it is so upbuilding. And I can't tell you how much it means to me. When I hear from you, I get a text or I get an email and you share, hey, this interview really helped me or inspired me. And it makes it worthwhile. This podcast, I started it 3 years ago, right before COVID. And there have been times I thought, you know what? I wonder if I want to keep doing this. I mean, it takes a little time to put this together, and it's certainly a labor of love. But when I hear the response, it means a lot to me. It's super encouraging, and it makes me grateful that I can help other people wherever they may be, whether it's in the States or in Central or South America or in Europe or in Asia. It's pretty amazing. So thank you. There are two things I want to let you know about right now. First of all, the Climb Small Church Leadership Conference, November 30th through December 3rd in Dallas, Texas. I want you to go. I want you to sign up. We already have right around 100 people registered. And what's so awesome is that's nearly as many as came to the first conference we ever hosted. We had about 125 people there total. We're praying that this year we'll have over 300 people in attendance. We've got amazing speakers. We've got an amazing program. It's going to be better than ever. And you can register at robskinner.com if you haven't already. So please sign up today. Secondly, talked about this before, but my dream is to plant 10 or more churches by 2030. My fifth church planting is the planting to Flagstaff, Arizona in 2021, and that is doing great. It's growing. Brian and Abby Mackey are doing a great job. My next mission target is Sahuarita, Green Valley in southeastern Arizona. Sahuarita is one of the top 5 fastest growing cities in Arizona, and I'm looking for team members and a church leader to plant that church in the fall of 2023. We're looking for families with kids, empty nesters, retirees to plant this beautiful area of Arizona. If you're looking to preach the word while raising your family, or you want to retire with a purpose, or you simply want to be on a growing mission team, contact me at rob@robskinner.com. That's rob@robskinner.com. Kevin and Noelle, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Last year, I went out to the campus training program in Marietta, Georgia that Tom Brown started a long time ago. It was awesome. But one of the best things about it was being able to stay with you guys. You guys hosted Pam and me, and we had such a great time. I mean, I had heard so many things about you from my daughter, Anne, who was in Bolivia, La Paz, Bolivia for a summer, and she came back raving about both of you guys. And just the opportunity to be able to spend time with you, it was far exceeded my expectations. I mean, it was like, I felt like I discovered a long lost friend, a person who loves to backpack and just all sorts of different things. And Noelle, you're just one of the most loving people I've ever met. So anyway, thank you so much for coming on the program and talking to us today.
Yeah, it's so fun.
We felt the same way, Rob. We really enjoyed meeting you and Pam.
Totally.
And felt like we could just sit for hours and just talk.
I know.
together. Yeah, totally.
Those chocolate chip cookies you made were amazing. They're absolutely fantastic. I could still remember them. How'd you guys become Christians?
Interestingly enough, when I was 20 years old, my mother's former middle school math teacher, who also was my junior college math teacher, sent her son, Roy, about a year older than me, to meet me. And I worked at a dry cleaners, and he studied the Bible with me. And so I became a disciple when I was 20, soon to be 21. And Roy and his family became very dear friends. So I've been a disciple for about 44 years now.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'll give a little bit different perspective when I experience. I was 17 my last month in high school when I was diagnosed with cancer. And I know we'll talk about this in a little bit, but when I was far away from home, 1,000 miles away and in the hospital, this two people and very significantly in my life planted seeds in my life. And it was a young lady named Lori that had the same type of cancer that came by my room and asked me, Noelle, have you ever wondered why we go through some of these things that we do? And I'm like, duh, yeah, And she said, I have too. And she said, I just wonder if maybe God has allowed me to go through my cancer because he knew I would meet you and I could encourage you to read your Bible and know how much God loves you. Now, I literally was like, oh, this person is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But actually that next week, my sister and I went out and bought Bibles. And that was when even though I was raised going to church my whole life, I wasn't a Christian by any means. That was the first time we started reading the Bible. And it wasn't until a few years later that, when I had gotten well and other things happened, that somebody reached out to my sister, Jean, just in passing. So another seed planter, Lori planted one and Lori passed away. Never knew what happened with us. And another young girl named Anita reached out to my sister, Jean. And we went to church down there in Florida and saw how people really loved the Bible. And my sister responded first, and then I did. And then my second sister, all three of us became Christians.
Wow.
So that was amazing. Just because of seed planters.
That's amazing. So you were in Florida. Kevin, where were you raised?
Yeah, I was in Tallahassee, Florida as well.
Okay, so both Floridians. How'd you guys meet?
Well, we had a campus retreat, I remember, and my roommate went to high school with Noelle, and I said, John, who is that drop dead gorgeous woman over there on the other side of the room? And he goes, oh, that's Noelle. And I had heard that she was an incredibly spiritual, but I could see that she was incredibly beautiful. And when I was transferring from Florida State to the University of Florida for med school, there was a sister in the church at Florida State that was looking to transfer, and she asked me to explore places where she could live in Gainesville with sisters in the church, and Noelle had a house with the space. So when I met Noelle officially, one of my preliminary trips to Gainesville. So that's how we met in 1983, I believe.
That sounds right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you both
met at church. Yeah.
You met at church. You guys are both Gators, is that right?
No, I wouldn't go that far.
I would go that far. Yes. Total Gator.
I'm a Seminole. I gained a medical degree and a Gator wife.
I see. Okay, so undergrad you went to Florida State, and then you guys were both in University of Florida for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now, Noelle, you mentioned your cancer. Would you mind talking about that, how it happened?
Sure. Well, I was in South Florida, the Fort Lauderdale area. I was a senior in high school. It was my last month of high school before I graduated. And I was super athletic. This is back when not many girls' sports existed, but super athletic, super into physical fitness, beauty, so much so that I was really struggling with anorexic things, which I was the only person I knew back then that dealt with that. But the last month of high school, I just had such severe pain behind my knee that I was strongly encouraged by my teachers to go get an x-ray, and found out that indeed it was cancer. It was a malignant bone tumor that it was very known to spread quickly and take your life. So I lived with my grandparents because both of my parents passed away when I was a young girl. And so my grandparents were too elderly to take me all the way from Florida up to Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, which was the only place consulted out of all the cancer institutes that said they would try to save my leg. And my grandparents loved me enough to help us figure out how to get up there. And I was 17 and my sister was 18, and we moved to Boston to live in the hospital. So I had a year of surgeries to try to save my leg. I had many, many months of chemotherapy to try to prevent the tumor from spreading. And after a year of trying to save it, my leg it wasn't healing. And so we had to have an amputation high above the knee on my right leg. And so that was a year and a half to two of just fighting for my leg and my life, but yet the most transformative years of my life because I really learned what was important. I've already mentioned about starting to read the Bible, which of course that was everything, but just to begin to see that what's really valuable in life forever impacted my life.
I mean, how do you cope with a diagnosis where the doctor says, "Hey, we're going to have to remove your leg"? I mean, how do you even absorb that?
Well, that's a great question. Certainly back in 1976, which seems so long ago, as it is. But I was the only person at that time that I even knew had cancer. So for that's unthinkable now. Now we hardly meet a family that doesn't have someone that has cancer in it, right? But back then, I was like, cancer, what does this mean? What does this mean? Chemotherapy, what in the world is this? So I think it was just, I have no idea what we're dealing with. And the severity of it was made known by the fact that, I could lose my leg right that minute, but they considered that the survival rate for me was somewhere around the 50%. And so I was just like, okay, wow, well, what are we going to do? Let's fight. And so it was frightening. It was humbling. It was reprioritizing. It was, woe is me. Wow, I may not live. And so the fighter instinct definitely kicked in of if it's meant to be, as long as there's life, there's hope. I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight hard. And it was brutal back then. That was when chemotherapy was very new. So you just spent days throwing up and just crazy. But I thank God, I thank God for that. It was a radical chemotherapy. It was a radical surgery. I fought to keep my leg for a whole year. I went through many, many surgeries to try to keep it. So I was in the hospital constantly, lived in the hospital on and off for a year. And, but when the physician said, Noelle, and I was very close to my physicians, he said, we've done everything we can. I think we've got to take your leg off. It was a deep realization that, wow, we've done everything that we have done everything that we could possibly do. Wow. And that helped a bit with the acceptance of, okay, we're in another chapter now.
Right. So I bet the temptation, I just can't imagine facing this. You could have gotten super bitter, angry with God. That person who said, hey, you should read your Bible, that could have just inflamed your anger, but you went a different path. How'd you make that decision?
It is amazing. I think my greatest defining moments in life, I think actually for all of us, are when we ponder the purpose of pain in our lives, and it can either help us to be better or bitter, and it can help us cling to God or make us run away. I think starting to read the Bible while I was in the hospital, that's all we did. I couldn't leave the hospital. I just started to see the goodness of God. I fell in love with Jesus. I met people. Massachusetts General Hospital is a huge complex. It's a dozen buildings connected together. It's like a city in and of itself. And I met people that worked in the elevators, nurses, doctors, cleaners, from all backgrounds, all lives. And I would hear their stories. And I'm like, wow, we all have things that we're learning. We all have hard times. But what we all long for is to have a meaningful life and to encourage each other. I just started seeing life through a different set of glasses. And also just the beauty of what, I mean, it sounds crazy to say, but the good things that come from pain is like you see people, you connect with people, you feel compassion with people, and um, and you've, well, I can use this to help somebody else if I can just keep moving forward. So those are some things that I pondered.
That's amazing. What was it like, adjusting to not having a leg? How'd you get around? What are you doing now?
Well, that was just good old fashioned hard work. It was, oh man, prostheses, particularly, I have a very short residual limb, just about 4 inches. So the more that the less limb that you have, the more difficult it is to function with a prosthesis. So mine definitely provided some challenges, and I didn't heal up so well. But I remember just saying, okay, if I'm going to be an amputee, I'm going to be the best amputee I can be, and just would put on the leg and walk and practice. It would be cut, it would be bleeding, it would be full of blisters, but I was like, okay, we'll figure this out, and just kept practicing and practicing. And then, when I walked pretty well, and walked very strongly because I was strong physically. But then I think when I made certain, my first job, going to work in a department store. Okay, how's this going to work? Okay, going back to college because I hadn't yet been to college. Then going to the University of Florida, and this is before the American Disabilities Act. And I remember the professor saying, "Well, hey, can you be a nurse? I mean, can you do this?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but I'm sure gonna try." So, I'd have to go in the bathroom a couple times a shift and take off my leg and put powder on and put it back on. I'm like, well, if that's what I have to do, that's what I have to do. But all the while, just I became a nurse that worked in the oncology field, helping people with cancer. So I felt like I was constantly encouraging and helping people of, man, as long as there's life, there's hope. Come on, we're in this together.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that might be an idea.
I can't imagine. I mean, when we stayed with you, your mother-in-law lives downstairs in the master bedroom. You guys were sleeping upstairs, and I just remember you climbing those stairs. I'm just like, oh my gosh, just what a sacrifice. I mean, you don't use crutches or anything like that. You get along without it, but I'm just like, it's inspiring. It's amazing.
The most interesting thing when I remember Noelle carrying a basket of laundry out to a clothesline on one leg and standing there and putting up all the clothes on one leg and carrying coffee, with one leg up the stairs on crutches, things that most of us are not coordinated enough to do. Noelle's got an incredible sense of balance and strength.
Well, when one part of your body is weak, the other parts become stronger, right? Isn't that so true?
Wow. Kevin, what led you into medicine?
Well, in high school, I said I wanted to go into medicine because my grades were pretty good, and it sounded good. High school, it's all about how it sounds, but I really did want to be in a profession where I could help other people, and wasn't exactly sure what that was, but I'd done fairly well in school, and I figured what I lacked in brains, I could make up with discipline and hard work. So when I was in junior college, I took an emergency medical technology course, the folks that are on the ambulance, and I just fell in love really with the science of medicine, as well as just the human connection, the compassion, the ability to help people in some of their toughest challenges. And that just fueled me through med school and residency. So that was the reason I went into medicine. And I absolutely am so grateful to God to be a physician. And I absolutely love what I do every day I go to work. So I feel very grateful that it's not just a job, but
Mhm.
it's really a vocation. It's kind of what I really feel like God called me to be.
What type of a doctor are you?
My training was in family medicine. Uh, I also got a fellowship in academic medicine as well as a master's degree in leadership. But in family medicine, I was in private practice for a while, and then I went into urgent care medicine in '98. So now we're considered to be an urgent care specialist, if you will.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Urgent care is everywhere now, but you were there in the early days. How'd you come up with that idea? Like, how'd you get into that?
Yeah. So when I finished my residency in '92, I went to work for a small family practice that had a walk-in component. So it was kind of a combined urgent care and primary care clinic. I did that for a couple of years and learned about the concept of walk-in care. And then I went into private practice in Durham for 5 years. And in '98, I got a call from an individual at Duke that I had known in my first practice and said that Duke had just acquired all of these primary care practices, family medicine, internal medicine, and the patients had no place to go nights and weekends. And the emergency department was not able to handle the need. And so they were looking to start an urgent care. They actually called it a doc in the box. I said, well, the first thing is, I'm not even interested if you're going to call it a doc in the box, because that seems a little derogatory.
Right.
But we had the opportunity, saw the need for sure. I mean, primary care couldn't take care of all the urgencies, nights and weekends, and the emergency department couldn't take care of all of it as well. And so I saw the need to be a part of the continuum of care. And we started the first urgent care center in 1998. And now it grew into a system. I think they have, I don't know, 7 or 8 urgent care centers now. It's a large system, part of the Duke University Medical Center network. And so that was exciting to start that off grassroots and really see that get blessed by God and really meet a need. And it really is about serving people. I mean, they're just desperate, for care, and they don't know if it's an emergency or if it's not, and just being able to do that. So I actually love urgent care medicine and being able to do that.
Are you still doing that now?
I am. I'm still doing that full time, 12-hour shifts. And with COVID, we were seeing 60 patients a day in our 12-hour shifts each. Now things have gotten a little bit better, and I'm actually going to go part-time in July so I can do more things other than just being in the urgent care.
Okay, so let's go back in time. Early 80s, you guys met at the University of Florida. You were a student. Kevin, you were a grad student. Can you give us just an overview of your career? Like, give us the 30,000-foot view of your career. Where have you guys been since that time?
So we both, Noelle graduated from the University of Florida in nursing. Me in medicine. We got married in 1986, the week after I graduated from medical school. And then we moved the week after we got back up to North Carolina. And so both Noelle and I went to North Carolina. Noelle worked, so I went to work at Duke as a resident. I do my training in family medicine, and Noelle was a pediatric oncology nurse at Duke. Is that right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's because I had a few roles. Yeah, I worked in pure pediatrics, and then actually was able to work with the hospital physicians to create a role for me to work specifically with just the amputee patients at Duke Hospital. So I could really focus there. So that was really great. I love that. That wasn't work at all. I created the job, so it was so fun. But I retired from that when my children were a couple years old, because having grown up not having parents growing up, I knew that I could always be a volunteer with cancer patients and amputees, people that have amputations. But for me personally, I really wanted to be at home to raise the kids, and we could afford that financially, which enabled me to be a volunteer.
And so Noelle actually became a nurse practitioner, if you will, before the profession of nurse practitioner existed. She kind of created that role at Duke.
Nurse clinician.
Well, that's what they call it, but
Yeah.
it was the same. And I did my residency at Duke, and then I really loved mentoring and teaching. And I did a 1-year fellowship in academic medicine. And then the funny thing was they offered me a job, and I said, I'll never work for Duke. And went into private practice and, urgent care, like I said, and then came back to Duke in 98 and was there until 2011. I got a master's degree. And so I was able not only to work with urgent care, but I became the associate chief medical officer of the primary care division. So I had an opportunity to work with those primary care practices that we were serving as well. And then we went to Bolivia. So.
Okay. So, and how long were you in Bolivia for?
Yeah. So Bolivia was interesting. How we got there is that I had been at Duke long enough that I met this rule of early retirement. And our daughter was graduating from high school, our youngest, and was thinking about doing a gap year. And we had gone overseas with Hope, and so to Kenya. And so when I realized I could retire early, I thought if there's ever a time in my life to get out of the boat, walk on some water, do something that's a little scary, go overseas, do something, now's it. And we went and talked with Hope, and they said, well, there's nothing in Africa, which we were disappointed because we loved Africa, but we are thinking about doing a pilot project in Bolivia. And so to answer your question, we wound up being in Bolivia. We were only going to be there for a year or two. We wound up being there for 8 years.
Wow. Okay. So you're there until 2019, and then you came back to Georgia.
Yeah, we came to Georgia, and then I started working in an administrative position as well as an urgent care position for the first year, and now strictly just clinical and urgent care with a health system here in Atlanta.
Okay.
And Noelle is full-time Hope director of the local chapter here and working in our communities.
You could have gone anywhere. Why'd you choose to go to Georgia rather than back to North Carolina or even Florida?
Kids. Our youngest daughter is here with her husband. They lead the youth and family ministry at the North River Church. And then our other daughter, Candace, single now, soon to be married, is in Charleston, South Carolina. And it just seemed like that to be here with Nick and Bree. The promise of grandkids was on the horizon. And we wound up coming to Atlanta.
That's awesome. Okay. So let's go and talk a little bit about Bolivia. This is really where I first heard about you guys. Why'd you go there? And like, what were you doing there? Can you talk a little bit about your mission?
Well, I guess either one of us, maybe I could respond first. I do think it's really fun, Rob, just to add that Kevin didn't emphasize it quite so much, but we have been super involved with Nairobi, Kenya, and East Africa for years. So when we were thinking about moving, selling our home in North Carolina and moving and living overseas and being able to devote full-time effort and support ourselves, really, to be able to devote effort to helping those who are in need, poverty, marginalized populations. We really thought we were going to go to Kenya because that was so logical. Like, duh, we're so close to everybody there. We are very close to everybody in the program there, helped to start a program there for kids, kids sponsorship program in Kenya. But it's funny that those doors, it's just like Acts 16, where Paul and Silas were going to go this way, but the Spirit wouldn't let them go. So they were going to go this way, but the Spirit wouldn't let them. We're like, this is so weird that it's not working out to go to Kenya. And then right at that time is when one of the Hope leaders said, well, what do you guys think about going to Bolivia? To which we both were like, oh man, we don't speak Spanish. Like, I know a few words. Kevin.
I was like, so can you tell me where in Europe Bolivia is?
So, I'm sure that fostered a lot of great
confidence in our
Yes.
ability to go to South America.
But I think that to answer, and I'll end here, and Kevin, you can continue that. But I think we both, not only just growing older as disciples, as in and falling more in love with Jesus is what I mean, and just seeing how Jesus walked with people, and he always walked with the hurting. We just were like, you know what, we want to give everything that we have, but we also know that we're going to learn more than we've ever learned in our lives. And so when the call to Bolivia came, I think our heart was just kind of that First Peter 4 of just wanting to use whatever gifts that we had to be able to help and serve and encourage. And so that's how we got to Bolivia, and it was amazing how all that pulled together. But Kevin can comment on that.
Yeah, for me, Rob, by nature, I am not a risk taker. I mean, people who go into medicine tend to be pretty calculated folks.
Right,
and
sure.
everything's kind of laid out for you. So not a lot of thought there. You just need to be willing to work hard. But I had read a book that says if you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat. And I also just had this nagging feeling while I was at Duke my last years there that my career was becoming more important to me than God was. And when I was converted, and way back when in 79, I wanted to have and continue to have that attitude of really being willing to go anywhere and do anything for God. And I just felt like I was being called. And when I found out I could retire early, that was a sign, if you will. And then it's interesting. I was very much like Gideon. I had a 3-page Excel spreadsheet with questions on it about moving to Bolivia that I felt needed to get answered for me to feel comfortable about moving to Bolivia. This is the calculated guy that I am. And not only did all 3 of those pages get answered, but a lot of miracles happened where our house sold almost before it went on the market, when the market was 9 months of selling. Duke made a special dispensation to allow me to retire with certain benefits that I would have lost otherwise. That meant a lot, enabled us to go to Bolivia and be self-supporting for a year. And so I went from being a Gideon with a lot of questions to where I felt like now I'm a Jonah, that if I don't go to Bolivia, I'm going to get swallowed up by a whale or something. But our first trip to Bolivia was it was amazing. I wanted to say breathtaking because where we lived in Bolivia was at 13,000 feet. It's twice the height of Denver. So it literally is breathtaking, but the country's breathtaking, and the altitude's breathtaking. The people are breathtaking. The opportunities are breathtaking. And after that exploratory trip going to Bolivia, I mean, we were all in tears because we felt like, and this is so out of my element, Rob, but we felt like that this would be a place we could go and use everything that God had given us, not only being in the kingdom for many years and knowing about parenting and marriage and just the Bible and leading the church and Bible studies and things like that, but my medical work, Noelle's love for the social work, and just even our own life experiences growing up, seeing people in Bolivia having those same life experiences and being able to relate to that. The little church that was there, we could talk about in a minute, but just needed encouragement and hope. And so we literally got on the plane in tears and came back to the States and sold the house, packed up everything, put stuff in storage, gave away stuff, and left the country in record time.
Wow. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about this. I think there are a lot of people that want to do great things for God. They want to make this life count, but it's scary. I mean, it's a sacrifice. And whether you're in your 50s like you were, or whether you're, 27 or 17, and you're thinking, I really want to, go overseas, or I want to do this or that, it can be paralyzing. And I think, for a person in their 50s, I go, you're a doctor. Yeah, you could retire early. At the same time, you could just stash the cash big time had you chosen to stay where you were doing. I mean, you just could basically pile up a really, really super nice, comfortable lifestyle for yourself. But you chose not to do that. How do you overcome the fear? How do you get the guts enough to pull the trigger and listen to your best instincts, the spirit working inside of you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Most everyone would say that's just ridiculous. Why are you going to leave the country in your what's considered the peak of your career,
Exactly.
your top money making years? I was at a really high level at Duke and a good salary and everything. And they said, that's just crazy. This is where you should be stashing it away. What's interesting, Rob, just as an aside, is that God has more than abundantly blessed us since we came back to the States. And anything that we would have had, we have more, I believe, to be honest with you. But with that is this 8 years of an amazing experience. But for me, I was just really honest with God. I just said, I feel like I need to get out of my element. And that desire is stronger than holding on to what's comfortable or even logical.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to grow in trusting God. There's no better way to grow in trusting God than go to a country where you don't speak the language and you've just quit your great job and you just sold all your possessions and you're there. And, and so I think it was that. And I think it was God just reassuring me. I mean, honestly, I'm not kidding about the 3-page list, but he just kept reassuring me, this is my will for you. And I told God, I'm a hard-headed guy. I just need you to hit me over the head with it. And when certain things happen, like the special dispensation at Duke, the selling of the house, the 3-page list being done, and then it goes on and on and on, I was like, it's obvious to me this is what God wants us to do. But I think we've got to be willing to ask the question and lay it out. God, what do you want me to do? And then explore. And God doesn't mind your questions. He doesn't mind the 3-page list. He's like, I can handle that. That's easy. And I just need you to have a willingness to go. And we did. Rob, I was definitely intimidated, extremely intimidated. In medicine, we're used to being kind of in control.
Right.
And I definitely did not feel like I was in control. But I look at that, and when you look at in the Bible, where Jesus is walking on the water and Peter says, I want to walk on water. He says, get out of the boat. Well, I felt that way by getting out of the boat of the comfort and the certainty of my career and all of that and everything that we had there in Chapel Hill. We met Jesus on the other side, and we got a chance to walk on water, not because we're awesome, but because Jesus is awesome.
Wow.
And we got a chance to do something that was transformative, not only for us, but for many people. And so it's like what motivated was the excitement of just getting out of the boat and seeing what God has in store.
Wow.
I don't know, well, you?
Well, I wasn't in a career, so I have kind of a complementary perspective, I think. But I was walking alongside of people, and I think sometimes life is about the steps, it's about seeds, it's about stitches, it's about the small steps forward. And I think that, one of the greatest things that God gives us is the privilege to walk toward needs, to walk toward people that are hurting, not walk away, but walk towards. And we can do that right where we are. Taking a step to plant a seed. It's just something I just believe so deeply, that seed, you see people and you do something. That's something that we can do every day where we are. You see people, you do something. And, I think that when we have that walk toward privilege in our hearts, which is totally is Jesus, he walked toward people that were hurting. He didn't walk away. He walked toward, because then there's some things that your eyes cannot ever unsee. There's some things that your heart can never unfeel because of walking with people that are hurting. And again, we can do that where we are. We should do that where we are. We should do that every day. That's part of walking like Jesus. But I was just going to say, connecting that to going someplace far away, that's the everyday walk of Jesus, no matter where you live. If you live in Atlanta, or if you live in California, if you live in Kenya, or you live in, Russia, or you live in South America, is the walk of Jesus is to, to love people. But sometimes it helps to take a short trip, or, to go visit someplace and purposely walk toward that, not necessarily to move there, but to walk there. And then your head starts thinking where your feet are planted. Your heart starts feeling where your feet are planted. And it's just because you took that step of God, show me. So that's just
okay. So that's great advice right there. So you say, plant seeds. I love that. See something, do something. And so seeds, that's awesome. So take some step, do something, even if it's super small, but try to move in that direction. And then secondly, go there, visit. You don't have to sell the house right off the bat, but just at least investigate. Go there and see. And what you shared, Kevin, is that you went there and it really moved you once you went there and went on a scouting trip. So that's great advice for a person who's thinking about doing something larger for God.
Yeah, I think, Rob, had we not gone to Africa for little 2-week trips, we had done that several times. Just going overseas and can be intimidating, and Africa can be intimidating, if you will. But we had done that, and I think had we not done those small things, we wouldn't have been in a place for God to say, "Hey, I want you to go move and be there."
That's awesome. Okay, so what are some of the things that you saw? What are some of your best memories from that time in Bolivia?
I feel like that if I was to summarize our experience in Bolivia in the 8 years we were there, it was about connecting and serving. And what I mean about that is that we opened a medical clinic and we connected the medical community to highly trained specialists that we invited to come over and teach. We provided high quality medicine in the neighborhood we lived. We trained young docs, Bolivian docs, eager to further their training in the United States. And there are 5 in the United States now that we trained that are now in the US. And we made these connections with healthcare. And so from a medical point of view, with our medical education, I worked with the US Embassy there. And we had medical brigades down in the Amazon, in the jungle, which was just amazing. And so with the medical, God allowed me to use my medical training, my love for teaching, in a great way to just really help the community and help the future doctors who would go overseas. And that allowed us to create the foundation, which is what Noelle and her team did. And Noelle can talk about that. And then, and just watching the church grow, you've got a couple here that have been Christians for over, 30 years. And there's so much we can give to the church. And the church was about 25. We were about 100 when we left.
Wow.
And, and we brought folks from all over the world because we were working with Hope for volunteer corps and medical things from all over the world. And the church saw we're part of a family that goes all over the world. And it just gave them this vision of what the church was and what it was. And we began to connect them to people all over the world. And we had several Bolivians come to the United States
for training.
And then, you talked about hiking and love for outdoors. Bolivia is one of the most naturally beautiful places in the whole world. It's breathtaking. And I enjoyed so much being out and being able to explore the beauty of that incredible God-made country. And but Noelle can tell you about the foundation. That was an incredible work.
Well, I think your question was, what were some of our most memorable memories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what is forever a part of our heart? And so yes, social programs, yes, but I think even more specific, it was the people. Just I could keep you on this podcast for 10 hours straight telling you about the people that took my breath away. They may be 10 people living in one room with no electricity, no running water, but the through the poverty, their character, their resilience, their courage, that nothing was easy for those who are materially poor. I think of the fact that the known abuse rate of children was in 70%. So I just assumed every child that I was with was abused, which completely changed my perspective of how I see people. Do I look for their stories? And so I think the people changed my life. And then I think the volunteers, that's people too, but I think we had about 800 people come during the years that we were there from across all over the country, mostly the United States, some from the Latin American countries and others from Europe. But what it was that it further expressed or embedded in my heart that life is about relationships, and we're created in God's image. God wanted relationships, and just the beauty of knowing people and connecting them and knowing they're all connected now just makes my heart just so smile. Like they're all connected, all these people, they keep up with each other. And just the volunteers, how their lives were transformed because they were able to walk like Jesus with the most hurting of hurting and not be overwhelmed, but to plant seeds, see people do something and know that God in his time will make that grow, that we get to live like Jesus. But yet they walked away going, oh, I've gained far more than I have given. And they go home changed, walking like Jesus in their everyday life. And that I think the convictions from those years there are immovable from my heart. They're unchangeable. And both mainly the convictions are, it's enough to be like Jesus. It's just enough. And Jesus was surrounded by crowds and chaos, but he always saw the one. And we can, you can't feed 500 people, then you can feed the one right next to you. If you can't smile and hug 1,000 people, you can hug the one right in front of you. If you can't, you can't change the whole world, but you can change somebody's world somebody's world somewhere. And it's usually the person right next to you that God has brought you to. But so many convictions about that. But the social programs that were started, which were not easy because we're like, okay, here we are. But we started with the heart of, we're here to build trust. We're here to lift up your arms. How can we best help? What can we do? And never worried about who gets credit for anything, but we're here to help you, support you. And, now 10 years plus later, those very relationships of trust with community partners, with orphanages, with hospitals, with the embassies, with those things are just, those relationships are so strong that now the social programs on the ground are just able to just to fly because there's trust. When there's trust, you can fly. So I would say, there's just too many things actually. But if I had to put them all there, I guess I would say the individual people, all the volunteers, and the convictions that it's enough to be like Jesus, and it's amazing. Okay.
My daughter Anne went down for a summer and spent time with you guys, and I remember her calling back and saying, oh, it's amazing down here, and she said, Mom and Dad, Noelle is incredibly loving. I've never met someone quite like her. She holds my hand. She'll hold my face in her hands and just stare into my eyes and give me hugs. And she's like, I don't think I've ever met anyone quite like this. You have an extremely loving and affectionate quality about you, Noelle. How'd you develop that? Where'd it come from?
Well, the hero of anything good is Jesus. And let me start there and actually finish there, but that is true. Is that Jesus takes my breath away, the way that he saw people and loved them. And I feel like I have Jesus moments in my heart for every person that I'm around. I've got a snapshot of Jesus that comes to my heart. But I think, kind of on a practical, like some things is, I think, it is the hardships, honestly, and the difficult things in my life that I think moved my heart to see people through a different set of eyes. When I was an orphan, both my parents died. My mom died when I was 7. My dad died when I was 9. I was the only orphan that I knew. And I remember just feeling so different and nobody to come to school with you. And I just remember when I saw orphans after that, it's like, I see you, I get you, I'm with you. I think I was the first person I ever knew that had cancer. So therefore, I'm like, see you, I get you, and so many other, different experiences. But I remember even just being in the hospital when I was a very worldly teenager, completely consumed with my hair and my physical body and my stature. And, I was totally all about that. And when you don't have your hair and you don't have the perfect body that you had a few months ago, you just start looking at, wait a minute, what is it about people that makes them beautiful?
Mm-hmm.
And meeting people from different cultures and from Haiti, from Africa, from everywhere, and just seeing their qualities, admiring them, expressing value, like you matter. And those kind of things are really the heartbeat of affection. Affection can be touch, but it's really their eyes. It's looking in their eyes, it's seeing them and helping them to realize how valuable they are with your words, with your time, and even just knowing people's names. That's affection. It's like, I'll never forget just when we first moved here too. It just constantly, God's always teaching. There was a young man that became a Christian in the campus ministry, and he's on the spectrum of some type of autism, and said hello to him at church. And I called him by his name, and he came up to me and goes, "You remember my name? You remember my name?" And I was like, oh my gosh. So I think that's the heart of, just the hard times often make you walk toward people, help you to see them, and in seeing them, you love them. And in loving them, you just feel what God created relationships all about. I don't know.
That's amazing. What you mentioned working in a cancer ward, specifically with amputees. What's that like when you are there and you have lost your own leg? I mean, what's the response from people?
Well, because I do walk with a limp, it didn't matter which room I walked into, whether the patient was old, cancer, young, pediatrics, whatever. People would always say, well, why do you limp? Oh, did you hurt yourself? And I always just use that moment to connect of, no, it's because I actually walk with an artificial leg. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I asked them, like, oh, no, 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 no. Let me tell you, it's great. I mean, I may walk a little funny, but I'm alive and I'm doing well. And so that right there taught me right there that you can use whatever it is to bring the walls down. It's amazing how that is. But with people who were battling cancer, to see someone, even if I might be very different from them, I might be a different age, I might be a different racial background, I might be, whatever, I might be old and they might be young, or they might be old and I might be young. But to see somebody that's living and functioning and pursuing life dreams gives people hope. It reminds me of Ecclesiastes 9, where he says, wherever there's life, there's hope. Wherever there is. And so I think that it was a constant joy to be able to say, our battle may not be the same. I see you and I understand, and you're not alone. And that gives people hope. To not be alone is so powerful.
It must have just inspired people. I mean, just to go, okay, this person gets me. They literally get me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't that what we all long for? Is we long to be seen, we long to be loved, we long to matter, and we long to belong. So, I think that's why when we do go through hard times, what is that phrase by Viktor Frankl, right? He says suffering ceases to be suffering when it finds its meaning. Is that when you go through hard times, but you find a meaningful purpose, that your pain can actually be a comfort to others, like 2 Corinthians 1 says, that God comforts us so that we can comfort others. It's just all of a sudden life takes on a richness of, oh, it's not about pain-free living, it's about meaningful living.
Wow.
And so yeah.
Okay, so you guys were in Bolivia for 8 years. You've had 800 people come through. You're raising up local doctors. They're going to the States to get training. You've got like a first world clinic in a third world country. Why'd you come back?
Well, it was time. We really loved being there, and we truly wanted as much as possible, and God blessed us in really feeling like this is where we belonged. And but the country itself was going through a lot of political challenges, and there was going to be an election, and it was going to be difficult. And the embassy was warning us. The medical clinic was doing great, except it just wasn't able to fulfill its purpose because it's very, very difficult in Bolivia to have a business,
particularly an
American-based business. Some of the rules, regulations, laws, and things, it was very difficult. And Hope Worldwide had also decided that they wanted to switch away from medical care, focus to more volunteer opportunities and smaller medical brigades, but not supporting clinics and hospitals. And
paradigm shift.
A paradigm shift with hope. Nothing bad, but they had said, we really feel like that because of the political situation, because of our change in focus, that we'd like for you to close the clinic. And while that was difficult, we see the wisdom in that. And we didn't know that there was going to be a pandemic, right after that. And we didn't know how challenging the political situation would be, but it was quite challenging. And God really spared us a lot. And then
spared us a lot as far as losing money with the clinic. And
and just it would have been really disastrous from a business point of view. And so God really spared us. We were able to sell the clinic and all the things to support the now foundation that still exists. And the other part of this was family. We had been away from our children for 8 years, and our youngest daughter was married. There was a promise of a grandchild in the near future. My mother was getting to the point where she couldn't live independently, and lives with us now. And we knew that was going to happen. And indeed, it happened a couple of years after we moved back. And so it was time, family-wise, to come back as well.
Wow.
And we had, the foundation was very successful and doing very well. And we knew that was the seed that God wanted us to plant long term. And the church was doing well.
And I think also just a deep conviction too, that life is about seasons and chapters, and and you do only have one family, and we had been apart from our family for 8 years. And I've already mentioned about my conviction about growing up an orphan myself, right? So but I think also that we wanted Bolivians to lead Bolivian work, and they were capable to do that, far more capable. And they have just catapulted forward through COVID, through the political coup, through death and dying that had happened in Bolivia with the COVID. They were able to just honestly continue giving, loving, and becoming a treasured social program foundation within Bolivia. Indeed, they won an award from the United Nations for just their work of just how they utilize their volunteers, and they are just growing. And there's a time for everything. And so
wow. You came back, you reached out to your mom. I heard there's some good news, Kevin.
Yeah. Well, I guess lots of good news, but one is that mom didn't know she had a really bad cardiac condition until we had been together for a while, and I realized she was having angina, and she wound up having emergency cardiothoracic surgery, and her life was saved because of that. And then mom was also baptized at the ripe old age of 85.
Wow.
In the swimming pool of one of our dear brothers here. And but it just showed her heart and her love for God, and that you're never too old. And so, yeah, so a lot of great news with mom.
That's really inspiring. Now, let's talk a little bit about your hobbies. You mentioned backpacking. What do you got planned? What are your upcoming hikes?
So I started hiking as an adult. I had the privilege of being a part of Sam Lang's Mighty Men of God group that he started in Triangle. It's when he was writing the book, and I had the privilege of being one of those guys. And one of the encouragements was,
okay, let me interrupt you real quick.
Please.
Is it true that you guys woke up and met at 5 a.m. in the morning?
5:30.
5:30.
We all got a letter from Sam saying, I'm inviting you to be a part of a group that will change your life. And we will meet at 5:30 promptly on Saturdays. And the inconvenient hour is chosen by design. And if you wanted it, you would be there. And believe me, we were not late. It was an incredible transformative group because Sam was really striving to help many of us who grew up without a father figure like myself to become men of God. And so hiking was part of that. He wanted us to get out. So I did my first hike, I think age 40 something. And I fell in love with the Appalachian Trail. And I've had the opportunity to do section hiking. So I've accomplished about 700 miles.
Wow.
And it's now been 10 years since I've been hiking on the Appalachian Trail. And I'm going out next week, going to do a 30-mile trek from the beginning of the Appalachian Trail, Springer, up to Neal's Gap, right after Blood Mountain. So with some brothers, a band of brothers, we're going to do a 3-day, 30-mile hike. And I just love being out like that. And so it's just a time to connect to God and to yourself, and you're a hiker, so you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I just had an awesome hike on Aravaipa Canyon, which was amazing. I think I shared about it on a previous episode, but it was a blast. I mean, it was it's 10 miles in, 10 miles out, and it was beautiful, just going through the water and just steep canyons. Now, the Appalachian Trail, tell me, just I don't want to get too far off track here, but two things I've heard: rains a lot and mosquitoes.
Yeah. So it really depends on what season, but it's called the Long Green Tunnel. And it's very wooded for most of the whole way. And sometimes you don't really see a vista, you see a green tunnel. And there are millions of people that are on the trail every year. And so it's grooved into the mountainside. And so in Georgia, where it starts in the summertime, it is hot and humid, mosquitoes and bears. And then in New Hampshire, in the fall and winter, it's freezing and dangerous to your health if you're not prepared. So it has all the adventure all along the way. But it's incredible. It really is. But it is definitely a place where you get in touch with God and nature and the beauty that God created. It's 2,200 miles long. And so plenty of time to see the vistas and enjoy just being out.
I'd love to come visit and do a section with you. That would be awesome.
Would love for you to do that.
But I've heard, though, that people get lost, or they go off the trail and have died, not too far off trail, but literally can't find their way back to the trail. It's so wooded.
Yeah. So in New Hampshire, Mount Washington, the trail goes right near Mount Washington. That is probably one of the most perilous parts of the trail because the weather can change in a matter of hours. You can feel like it's springtime, summertime, or fall, and next thing you know, there's a snowfall, winter. You can't see the landmarks, and you can die of hypothermia. They even have a book they wrote called Not Without Peril about that part of the trail. But then on the other side, the incredible vistas are breathtaking, literally breathtaking. So, like many things in life, the things we've been talking about during this podcast, the risk is worth the reward.
That's right. I mean, I got into backpacking. I mean, just because I thought, hey, this being like Jesus. Jesus took his disciple. First, he walked everywhere, and he took people up on the mountains. He took people on retreat, and I go, what a great experience. You get time to talk. And for guys, it's just awesome. I mean, I mean, I took my 2 campus interns, Kevin and Cole, out for 2 nights and 3 days. I mean, it was bonded us for life. I mean, we were loving it. So,
Amen.
Final question. What advice would you give to a person who wants to make this life count?
Go ahead, Noelle. I have my answer.
You want to go first?
All right. I think mine's pretty simple, Rob. And I appreciate the question, because I think we should think about that, in our lives. Sometimes we're so busy that we don't think about what could I do or should I do to get the most out of this life God's given us. It's precious. It really is.
Exactly.
I think one is we need to realize that we've got a whole lot more to give than we think we do. And I think that concept of getting out of the boat, that was very real for me. Being willing to get out of our comfort zone and out of what is familiar and what is safe and what is secure, to get out of the boat, because the truth is Jesus is on the other side of that boat, and the miracles, like Peter walking on water, are on the other side of that boat. It's not in the boat, it's out of the boat. And so the willingness to take on risks and to grow in trust and allow God to put you in a situation where you just will grow in your faith and your trust. And so to me, that is the lesson there, I think, is just the willingness to let God let you go.
That's awesome.
Well, I would say the first question comes to mind is, well, who was the most impactful person that ever lived? And obviously that's Jesus. He's still changing our lives today, 2,000 years later. And so then what's my most encouraging advice is, it's enough to be like Jesus. And what I mean by that is, when Jesus sent the disciples out after they'd been with him for a while and they'd heard the Sermon on the Mount and they'd been with him healing people, helping people, he sends them out in Matthew 10 and, okay, don't take any food, don't take any clothes, don't take any of this. You don't even know where you're going to stay. And that he goes, it's just enough to be like me. And that is profound. And yet that means everybody can do it. And I think that I have my go-tos that I'm unshakable. I don't know about on the western side of the United States, but on the eastern side, there's this store that was created, 50, 60 years ago called 7-Eleven. I don't know. Have you ever heard of those, Rob? 7-Eleven?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Well, the reason I say that is if there's one glimpse of Jesus that makes me want to be like him more than anything in the world, it's I go to Luke chapter 7, verse 11. And it's my run in quickly to get a glimpse of Jesus. And then I run out of those scriptures and I just can't wait to be like him. And that scripture talks about how Jesus was surrounded by crowds himself. And as he's walking, he sees a widow coming and she is surrounded by crowds. And yet he's surrounded by crowds. She's surrounded by crowds, but he looks, he sees her, he goes up to her, he speaks to her, he touches her, he brings back life. And the response of everybody is, oh my goodness, they were filled with awe. God has come to help his people. And I just feel like when we are like Jesus, we're living the most impactful life. Wow. And so my encouragement to every young disciple, every old as dirt disciple, and encouraging even myself is my practice to read a gospel chapter every day based on the date. Today's the 20th. Today I read Matthew 20. I read many other things, but I always read the gospel of the day because I wake up knowing I get to be with him. And we become like who we listen to. We become like who we spend time with. and the disciples spent 3 years with Jesus, I've been able to read my Bible for over 40. So that's, oh my goodness. And so anyway, I think that's it. Even with today's challenges, I don't stick my head in the sand and be like, oh, I don't want to deal with all the current issues that are going on. No, it's a walk toward privilege, because when you walk toward like Jesus and you're determined to love, my other little acronym is Justice, Justice, just ICE, imitate Christ's example, and you will bring justice that the world is crying for. So anyway, I have just a gazillion scriptures, but I know we don't have time for that. And Kevin's poking me saying, quiet, woman, quiet, too much.
That's fantastic. I love these. Justice, just imitate Christ's example. I mean, absolutely. How about 7-Eleven? I mean, that's awesome. It makes life so simple, doesn't it? You just think about it. Just go in real quick, take a look at Jesus' example, his care. And I love how you said that, wherever you live in the world, whether you're in the affluent areas of the world or in the developing areas, you can still have a very powerful, meaningful, and loving life, because you can be like Jesus. I mean, it's Jesus said, it's not the abundance of possessions that makes a life. And you guys have clearly shown that in your example and your sacrifice. So thank you so much for this time. If anyone wanted to reach you, ask questions, some follow-up questions, how could they reach you?
Yeah, they could text us, or email us. And so my phone number is 919-564-9515. Noelle's phone number is 919-699-8745. My email address is wkbroyles@gmail.com. And Noelle's email address is
nfbroyles@yahoo.com. Yahoo!
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and include those in the show notes if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Love you guys. Thank you so much.
Love you, Rob. Thanks.
Big hugs to Pam.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Here's how you can help support the program. First, hit the subscribe button and let your friends know about the program. Secondly, read and review one of my books, either How to Plant and Grow a Church or Courage, How to Make This Life Count. You can find them on Amazon.com or IPI Books. Thirdly, support the program financially by going to the TucsonChurchofChrist.org website and hit the Donate tab. Now, Tucson is spelled Tucson, churchofchrist.org. Select the General Fund, and your tax-deductible gift will help me multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no-regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day, and make this life count.